Okay. So, now we have discussed about the different layer of KM system, starting with interface layer to depositories layer. So, once you have decided about different layers and how they are going to be integrated, then the next stage that is that we need to create a prototype, and then finally we deploy the system. So, what we are going to discuss here is that how to create a prototype of a knowledge management system, and then how we are going to deploy that particular system. Part of that we have already discussed, but here we are going to discuss it in much detail, that how prototyping is done and then how we go about or move about system deployment. So, the topics that we are going to cover in the next two lectures include that what are the activities that we need to do for system development, because since now we have been talking about what are the things that need to be done in order to develop a good KM system. Then once we have decided about all these things, then we move to develop a prototype. Prototype is nothing else, but it is a kind of you can say replica, or you can say blueprint, which tells you that okay, this is the kind of KM system that we want to develop. Okay. And then we will also discuss the deployment, and that how we go about deploying a system, whether it is going to be incremental or we are going to have a system, full-fledged system, but in most cases it is recommended that you go for a incremental methodologies, where you are going to develop one by one and add to the system. So, and then ultimately you have a full-fledged system. Instead of developing the full-fledged system at one go, but there is a need that you go for a incremental methodologies. We are going to develop one by one part of the system and you also look into the result, and that is why it is known as result driven incremental methodologies, right. So, these are the topics that we are going to cover in the next 2 hours. So, we will start discussing about the prototyping and development. Okay. Now, if you look at system development, see there are a lot of cost that is associated with system development, because you have to see that it could be related to the technology costs, like having systems related to IT, software and hardware, but apart from that there are costs related to deployment and implementation of the cost system, right, the KM system. So, it is not only other costs, but there could be the cost could be divided into two parts, that is technical cost and non-technical cost in deployment and implementing of a knowledge management system. Okay. And when you are going to develop or deploy a new system, it is always a learning experience, because you learn from what you do. So, gradually you try to build up a system which is more robust and work more effectively to the advantage of the organization. So, we start discussing about what is prototyping. Now, if you look at prototyping, prototypes are basically what? Okay. If you look at prototyping, it is nothing else but a kind of say raw document which tells you that okay, these are the things which are going to be included in a KM system. Okay. Now, if you look at this, it says it are the most underused form of rejection insurance that a development team can ever purchase. What does it mean? It means that when you are going to buy a insurance, what happens? Okay. You are going to see that what are the benefits, okay, how it is going to help you, right, what is the cost, what are the benefits, right. So, similarly, when you are going to buy or build a KM system, you are going to give an analogy with the insurance, that okay, in what way it is going to benefit the organization, and at the same time you also need to convince the management by showing them the prototype or the kind of system that you want to have, okay, so that the management is convinced about the benefits and use of the system for the people in the organization. Okay. So, you need to develop a prototype. Okay. How are going to develop it? So, you have a small part of our system of KM, implement in one part or one unit of the organization or related to one particular function, and then you keep on increasing that or extending it to other part or units of the system, right. Depending upon your experience, you can see whether it is working well whether it is effective, it is giving beneficial results to one part or the unit of the system, okay. And then gradually you move up and try to have a good system, knowledge management system. So, when I am talking about prototyping is nothing else, basically you want to see whether the kind of system that you want to develop is going to really help you or is going to be beneficial or advantage or not. So, you develop one part, okay, and see that how does it help you, what are the results that you are going to achieve, right. Say for example, when you do a research, what we do? We want to test the assumption on a small set of population, right. The idea is that if the assumptions are found correct on a small set of population, a small sample, then you try to move to a full fledged research. So, that is what we know as pilot testing in research. Similarly, when you are going for pilot deployment or pilot testing of a knowledge management system in an organization, you do not go for developing a full fledged system in the beginning itself. The idea is that have a small system in place, knowledge management system, okay. Try to implement in a particular unit, look into the benefits, okay, and if you find that it is good, it is providing desired results, then accordingly you try to develop a full fledged system. Let me give an example, like having an enterprise resource planning system, ERP system in an organization. Say in our system, in our organization, we have now a full fledged ERP system, but before developing a full fledged ERP system, this system was tested on a small scale with a set of or a unit of student population to see that whether it is cost effective, it is providing relevant information, whether the people are able to use that system properly and effectively or not. Okay. So, once you are sure about this, then only you extend it to other stakeholders like faculty, staff, and then you also integrate data related to various functions, right. For example, in organization you can start with using this system with an R&D systems and see whether R&D systems, which is basically more knowledge driven and knowledge intensive system, whether it is really working there or not. So, if it is really working there, because CAM system is basically used by R&D to come out with innovative products and systems. So, if R&D systems is finding it useful, then you can extend it to other part of the organization, so that they can make use of the CAM system. So, you can extend it to marketing, HR, finance and other, and then you can integrate the entire system at the organization level, right. The idea is that when you go for pilot testing, it is very, very important to see that whether your pilot test gives you significant and good results or not, okay. And that also helps you to identify whether there are certain attributes which are not working, which are not functional, or there are certain flaws in the design of the knowledge management system before you move to a full fledged deployment of a system. Okay. So, there are two things, you will be able to identify the flaws or the drawbacks of the system, which can be pinpointed by the users, okay, and at the same time you can also look into the benefits of the system, okay, before you move further, right. So, you go for pilot deployment to start with. Now, how do you select a pilot project? Because initially you have to start it from somewhere, okay. So, where you are going to start? You may think about those projects or those departments which are much more simpler, much say straight, okay, which are not very, very critical for the organization, because if it fails, it is going to hamper the organizational activities, okay. So, you have to use certain criteria when it comes to identifying and selecting a pilot project, okay, because unless pilot projects are viable, you cannot move up and extend it to other part of the system or the organization, okay. So, there are certain criteria like you need to avoid trivial projects which are very, very complex in nature, because there you may not get the desired results, right. There could be more disadvantages or drawbacks or flaws compared to the advantage that you can get, okay. Similarly, you also need to stay away from company's lifeblood. It means that you need to leave out those departments which are very critical, because if it fails the entire activity is going to stand still. Okay. Then you have to look at those projects, okay, which are visible, which you know that if we are going to use these pilot projects in these departments or units or functions, it is going to really work. Say for example, if you want to make use of KM system at the pilot level in the R&D system, I think that is the best way to do it, because if R&D system is going to make use of the KM system to go for innovations in the products and the processes, then it is going to be more visible and people will be able to recognize the effects. They would be able to notice that, okay, see the R&D department has a KM system and see that their productivity and efficiency has increased. They have come out with new products and systems, processes to improve the efficiency and the quality of the productivity of the organization. So, if these kind of things are coming up, it means that people will come to know about it. So, what would be the outcome? Yes, people will look forward to these kind of things in their departments. So, they may be pulled by these attractions of a successful pilot project in R&D system to other parts of the organizations, other functions of the organizations. Okay. Similarly, you also see that, okay, it fits with the technology. Okay. Since R&D system is going to be a system where they are going to be more knowledge driven, knowledge intensive, and they are going to use the kind of technology which basically favors a KM system, you can go for that. And similarly, you can also set certain deadlines in terms of outcomes or the times, and then also see that how we are going to evaluate. So, you need to develop certain metrics which I will discuss later for successfully evaluating a KM program, right. For example, you can use traditional ROI measures, or you can also use balanced scorecard and other kind of measures to see whether the knowledge management has really helped the organization or not. Okay. And similarly, you have to basically look for those projects which are not product oriented, but process oriented. Okay. So, when you go for process innovation, R&D is the best example to look at it, and that is where the users are going to be impacted by the KM system, because if you are going to go for certain innovations or redesigning the process, then they will look into the process and see that they can get lot of information about the KM systems, about the different kind of processes which they can make use of it. Okay. So, these are some of the considerations when you want to make use of select a pilot project. So, the idea is to that you have to start it from where you find that, okay, it is going to successful. Okay. It is not that critical for the organization, because if it does not work, it is not going to anyway hamper the activities of the organization. Okay. And it fits with so far as technology is concerned. Okay. And you are able to manage and evaluate the success of the KM project. So, you can see that, okay, in a given time frame how well the R&D team has done in terms of coming out with the new products and systems or processes. Okay. And that is how you are able to manage the project well. Okay. Now, so far we have been talking about system deployment. Then you also need to see that what kind of data warehouses we have. Okay. So, data warehouses basically which are part of the repositories, okay, in the organization. So, we have to see that instead of spending more money on creating more data, used databases in data warehouses, we need to basically focus more on the quality of information or the data that we have, and then how we are going to have access to it. So, instead of basically emphasizing on the quantity of the data, it is always good or prefer to have focus on quality of information and data that you are going to have in your repositories. And then you also need to see that at the user interface level how you are going to have access to this kind of data. Then at the next stage you also need to see that for a small pilot project, suppose you want to have a data warehouse, then especially for, say for example, in R&D case, then the quality of information is more important than the quantity of information that is relevant and actionable in the context. Okay. Then since you are going to experiment with say pilot project having a KM system for a particular unit, so if you experience success, then you can proliferate it to other parts, and if you experience failure, then that creates lot of impediments or barriers for you to implement it to other part of the organization. Okay. So, you also need to see that when you are going to implement and experiment with such pilot projects, okay, ultimate goal is to achieve success. Okay. And if you do not achieve success, it will have its own consequences or dangers. Okay. Then legacy deployment method, how we are going to integrate data which is the software other part that is already there in the organization with the KM system, right. Say for example, you have a R&D system which has gone for pilot project, you have selected for a pilot project, and then which is responsible for what? Product and process innovation, and that is where you have deployed a KM system, right. Now, how this KM system of R&D department, it needs to be integrated with the system already existing system, say production department. Now, the technology that is already there with the KM system need to be integrated with the R&D system, okay, because whatever is being done by R&D system is to be used by the production system, because ultimately they are going to produce the goods and services, or they are going to see that how the process innovation that is being developed by the R&D system has to be incorporated in the technology that is there with the production and operations department, okay, in terms of efficiency, quality, features, innovations, whatever it is. So, it is very, very important that how we are going to integrate other systems with that, or how we are going to extend this to other part of the system, okay, and that is where you are going to use incremental approach. Okay. This is basically for development and deployment of a KM function from one unit or one department or one department to another department or another organization. Okay. So, what you need to look at is that yes, you have to be very careful when it comes to legacy deployment, because you have to see that in terms of technology and other things you are able to integrate them well, okay. And if you are able to integrate, then you will be able to implement the system in other parts of the organization, you will be able to increment it rapidly, okay, depending upon the requirement. So, for example, if you gone to the production department, so production department had integrated the system with the KM system, and that now it is a part of the KM system. So, whatever information is there, that goes to them, and then it is embedded into the system in such a way, so that production people are able to make use of the innovations that is made by the production R&D department based on the innovations. What next? Then you need to integrate other parts of the system, say marketing function, okay, because marketing people are going to sell the product. Okay. So, they need to be integrated that, okay, this is the new feature of the product which is going to be advertised in the market. Okay. So, then marketing department has to integrate this with the production system. So, now you have R&D, production and marketing, these three departments are integrated. Next, you feel that, okay, you need to see that people have the capability to do these things. So, you further move up to integrate the HR department, then finance department, and then gradually you are going to integrate the entire organization together, right. And that is why the entire system can be implemented incrementally, and the changes made depending upon the requirement in the system, right. Look at this, the different stages you analyze, design, develop, test, deploy system in a particular unit. Okay. If you find that, okay, these specifications is successful in a given time frame, then move up to the next, then you move to the next, then you move to the next, and you go through the same process, and then you integrate this one by one, so that the system works well, right. Then moving to the next part of legacy deployment, basically the model that is used is known as waterfall model. Waterfall model, you know, waterfall model, what happens, the water is coming from somewhere, it goes down, then from here it moves to some other part, right, isn't it. So, it means that the water that is there is collected from different sources, okay. It gets a force, and then it as a force it goes down, right, and from there again it moves to some other part in a different mode, right. So, if you look at this waterfall model, it is basically incremental, because the water is coming from different sources, gets collected at a particular place. If a force is created, then it moves further, right, and that is how you are going to use it, this legacy deployment. So, incrementally one by one you are going to deploy the system one after another depending upon the success, right. But whether it is a good approach or not, that is criticized, because not necessarily that when you are going to develop a complex system, it is going to help you, because then the problem of integration and extension integration comes there. So, what you need to do, you need to create systems of feedback and learning at each stages. Okay. So, this feedback and learning loop is very, very important, because if you create that, then what happens, you create discrete phases, and that each phases you learn from the experiences, get the feedback, and accordingly when you move to the next stage, you make certain revisions in the system deployment, so that the next part is better and correct, right. Now, if you look at this is what happens. This is the incremental approach that is to be adopted. Initial investigation, okay, you find what is the requirement, then that is where you are going for design, development and testing, right. Now, if you look at these arrows, you move from here to this. So, this is a incremental approach in pilot testing, and then once something you have designed a system, you have developed it, and then you are going for testing and deployment. Okay. Then you also go for post deployment review at each pilot project. So, once this post deployment review happens and you get the feedback, you send it back to the system, so that if there is any changes that can be made here, and then when you go for testing and deploying it to the other part, you make the corrections. You make the corrections, the design, development, and when it comes to deployment of that. Okay. In the next, say for example, you have tried to integrate the R&D with the production department. Okay. So, the lessons that you have learned from R&D department, okay, can be integrated when can basically help you to design a KM system which is going to be integrated with R&D in a better way. Okay. Similarly, the lessons that you learn or the feedback that you get from the production department and R&D department can help you to design a better marketing approach, right. So, when you are going to integrate or extend it to the marketing section, you need to see that the learning experiences from the production department and R&D department is embedded or is a part of the KM system when it comes to the marketing system. Okay. So, this feedback loop gives you information about the drawbacks, okay, and also the level at which or the extent to which you are experiencing success, so that accordingly you can make changes in the design and the development aspects, okay, before you are going to deploy it to the next stage, and that is where you are going to adopt a information incremental approach model route. Now, another important issue is related to the packaging. How are we going to package the information? So, we have talked about certain things in the beginning also, like architectural and system planning, okay. What kind of knowledge management architecture we are going to have, what kind of KM system we are going to have. Okay. So, we have already discussed about it, like the KM system which will have different layers and how these layers are going to be integrated, and what kind of knowledge management system or architecture is going to be there. We have also talked about the design and analysis part, how we are going to design, okay, the system, how we are going to analyze the requirement at each and every stage, and then how we are going to implement the technology, because technology is nothing else but these are the conduits of the information. So, what kind of information technology in terms of softwares and hardwares would be required, and then how we are going to deploy the system and then test it. Metric testing means evaluation of the system, right. So, the information that is packaged into the content in the system, when it comes to testing that, we need to follow these kind of things. So, that is what we are going to discuss one by one. Okay. See what happens at the different stages. The first part is the architecture and systems planning. Okay. Initial stages, that is what we are going to do. Next stage we are going for design and analysis, then we are going to look into the technology part, and finally we are going to deploy and then see that how the system is working. At this stage, if you look at architecture and system planning, what actually happens, you identify what are the success factors, okay, what are the constraints in terms of finance, time, these kind of things, whether resources are available, how we are going to measure the success of a KM system. Then you are going to identify what kind of requirements are there in terms of knowledge, why, how it is related with our strategy, what are the cost benefits in terms of payoffs in long term and short term, okay, who are the stakeholders who will be using this knowledge, right. And then from there you move to the next part, okay. Then you are going to define the knowledge, the goal of the knowledge management system, what, and then you also look at the risk that is available there, then who is going to use it, okay, what are the features, okay, and then you come out with initial specifications of the KM system. Moving to the next part, that is where you are going to see that how the technology is going to enable that, right. What are the different components of the system, how are you going to select and build these components. I am talking about the components of the KM system, that is nothing else but the 7 layers of the systems, and how what is their independency and how they are going to be linked with each other, okay. And then finally you go for pilot testing, okay, and based on pilot testing you are going to get feedback, and based on feedback you are going to extend it, scale up it to other parts of the organization, and then you are going to integrate at the organization level. Now after the technology implementation part, the next is deployment and metric testing. Deployment and metric testing is nothing else but formally you are going to commission the KM system at the organization level, and then that is where you are going to provide training to the stakeholders who are going to make use of the system. You also get feedback from the various stakeholders, and then you are going to integrate with other legacy applications, other software and hardware that is available with the organization, okay. So that is how the information is to be packaged, okay. Now see what happens, how we are going to package this. This is a spiral methodology that you are going to use one by one, right. So starting with say business process design, then functional design, then interface prototype, then you have application prototype. So see how they are related with each other. So it is a kind of a spiral that you are going to build up, starting with look at the business process, look at the function, what kind of prototype you want to have, what its application, and then again you move to the next one. So that is how you move to the next one, and then again you move to the next one, and this is for different kind of system. So this may be for one unit or department, then you move to the next one, then you move to the next one, and then you also keep on getting feedback so that you can revise it, redeploy modify the system at the next level, so that you have a better integration among the different departments, right. Then you also have a big bang approach to deployment, okay, where you are going for delivering equal implementation. It means that you are going to do it, okay, you are not going to follow say incremental methodology, but you are going to have everything for the entire organization, okay, implement everything at once, okay. Once you have developed the KM system, you are going to make sure that it is going to be implemented for all the departments at the same time. Now what are the advantages of having this kind of system, okay? You can see the advantages are there, like you can see that how the system is helping different groups or functions of people, okay, who are going to be most affected, what are the drawbacks of different systems. So you can get feedback from the entire system at the same time, okay, and then you can go for making changes. But in an incremental approach, what happens, you are going to make changes and integrate it one by one, which could be, there could be cost and time overrun also, but this is more cost beneficial. If you look at cost benefit analysis, it is really better, but the advantage is that it does not work, then the entire KM system is going to fail and it is not going to provide you any kind of advantage. So there is a lot of risk that is involved in this kind of approach compared to an incremental approach, okay, because that is less risky, because you are going to use only one part of the system at the one time, right. Look at this. So what does this tell? Look at the benefits and the time period. So these are the different targets that you have, and then you are going to deploy it, okay, and see what happens. Then another issue is that whether you should go for enterprise level integration or not, whether it is going to be advantageous for you or it is going to be a bane, right. See, it is always good to be flexible, because it allows you certain benefits, okay, and if you are not able to do it, then you have certain risks that is associated with which can be reduced, okay. But at the same time this could be a bane also, right, because if you are going for enterprise level integration, it means that you need very lot of flexibility in your system, okay, lot of tweaking to work for your companies, okay, and then you also need to see that the kind of software that you are using, okay, is good enough to take care of the load, okay. So when you are going for enterprise level integration, it means that you are going to integrate the KM system at the organization level, then you make sure that using certain criteria that whether it is going to be successful or not, like the kind of risk that is associated with this kind of system, what is the likelihood of success or failure, how the critical departments or functions are going to be affected by it, whether there is going to be cost and time overrun. So these are some of the issues that need to be looked into. See that they have to extensively amplify the benefits, okay, and if that happens, then you can go for it, otherwise not. Otherwise what will happen? It is going to be a curse for you, and the system is going, if system is not going to work, and if you do not have the support system for these kind of things, then it will create lot of problem for you, okay. So this is the enterprise level integration, okay. So that's all. Thank you.